On this episode, Ben covers the importance of sulfur and the benefits it has to increasing yields. New materials further explain the stellar qualities of the Enlist system. Stick around for Joe's livestock-themed corny jokes. Would you like your question answered on Cup of Joe? Submit one to us on our website.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Cup of Joe, episode number 27, season 3. Well, we have a little bit of a new look today. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but it's not going to change anything. Tommy's not here today, but we still have Turk and Ben here, and they got a lot of good information. And this past week, we had the opportunity to sit down with one of the most influential people in our industry, and that was Harry Stein. And we asked him some questions about Stein corn, and I'm going to turn it over to Ben and let him take it from there.
One of the key things that he talked about in his program is how sulfur is so important, and potassium. And one of the reasons that I wanted to touch on sulfur is because it's probably not something that's traditionally been in the nutrient portfolio, because we've been getting so much from the acid rain and such off of coal plants and stuff. But as we move in, a lot of the top yield guys are really playing with sulfur and figuring out how much they need and the timing to apply. So I kind of wanted to back into sulfur just a little bit and talk about what it does and how many pounds we should be thinking about applying, because most guys aren't applying anywhere near the levels that they should be if we're trying to reach 250, 300 bushel yield goals. So sulfur is it plays a key role in protein synthesis. These proteins are used for photosynthesis, chlorophyll formation, and nitrogen fixation. And that last point there, the nitrogen fixation point, is a key role. There's studies done in South Dakota that talk about if your sulfur deficiency, if let's say you have 0 parts per million out in the field, you can apply 200 pounds of nitrogen and you're only going to get about 50% of the use rate of that nitrogen. And all that you have to do is get to that 10 to 12 parts per million sulfur in the soil, and then you're fully using that 200 pounds. It helps that plant use the nitrogen in the adequate way that it's supposed to be using. So
it's kind of like having a car full of gas but no tires. You're not going to move, right?
Correct.
So you need that sulfur, which would be the tires, to make that car move, and the gas being the nitrogen. So Harry really emphasized the importance of sulfur to going up to the next level on yields.
Yeah, and it's, we're talking 0.1 to 0.2 pounds per bushel is what the removal rate is, and you want to make sure that you have all of that ready to roll. You want to make sure that basically by flower time you still have 50% of your sulfur uptake happening. So once you hit R1 in corn, you need to make sure that you have at least 10 to 20 parts per million left in the soil. If you're actively going out and pulling soil tests or actively going out and taking tissue tests, you want to make sure that you're not deficient when you're finishing that season out, because there's quite a bit of sulfur that still goes into the grain fill portion. So if you think about how Stein corn flexes in girth and width, when you have a more determinate ear type, just like when we get into a drought situation, that's where you can be missing some of the final step if you don't have rain. The ear doesn't flex with the last rains. Sulfur is built into that component as well. It's like a drought reliever. You want to make sure that you have all of those nutrients available, your nitrogen and your sulfur, in plenty amount to make sure that you're flexing out the last bit that you can to achieve maximum yield potential. So sulfur is extremely important. Some of the products that we are most common to be used are ammonium sulfate, ammonium thiosulfate, and K-Mag are all great options depending on how you want to apply them.
So Ben, how much should a farmer be using when it comes to sulfur?
Depending on soil type, we're probably thinking somewhere between 45 and 60 pounds. And I would be leaning on the heavier side of that recommendation.
Well, Ben, when you say 60 pounds of sulfur, what exactly, how are you measuring that? How do you figure that 60 pounds?
That's the actual amount of sulfur, active ingredient sulfur that you're needing in there. So if you have a 26% product, so like for example here, let's take not a lot of people use elemental sulfur. Let's take ammonium thiosol. It's 26% sulfur, so you'd have to have 100 to 120 to 150 pounds of ammonium thiosol to get your 45 to 60 pounds that you actually want out in the field that's available for the corn plant to uptake.
Very good.
Yeah, so Sulfur's key. It's something that I think guys are really going to be looking into. A lot of guys are putting sulfur in their banding strips when they're using starter with their planters and stuff. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this as we move forward.
So it's actually not a secondary element. It's a primary element now today.
Yep. NPK and S.
And S. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just because we just are not getting it from the coal-fired power plants, and which had a lot of sulfur in it, and slowly over the decades that's depleted, and then we slowly didn't notice it overnight, but over a slow period of time, we're getting less and less sulfur.
Yep. And one of the things also to note or mention is that sulfur is immobile in the plant. So when you start to see the deficiency, it's on the youngest leaves, which means it's in the top of the plant. If you start to see that deficiency, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're already in a bad position. So you want to make sure, like I said, 50% of that uptake happens after R1. You want to make sure you have plenty of sulfur in the soil at that point, because it's very key, because you can't. The plant's not going to cannibalize itself like nitrogen or potassium, where you see the striping on the leaves work its way up to the top. I mean, the plant will cannibalize itself to finish itself out. With sulfur, if it starts showing up, you're already behind. So you're already going to see yield loss associated with that.
So I have one other question on sulfur. Is it mobile in the soil? In other words, should it only be put on when you put nitrogen, or what's the best time to put sulfur on?
It depends on the soil type. If you have heavy soils, and let's say as we move north, let's say the southern border of Iowa, as we move north, you're probably good to be running elemental sulfur and then supplementing that with the sulfur that you're running in your planter, because the soils are heavier and they're going to be able to hang on to the sulfur better. It's not as leachable as nitrogen, but it's a little bit leachable. Now, as we move south, where we get lots of metabolization and a lot more rain, that's something where the supplemental applications like that we do side dressing and Y dropping later on in the season, and where the soils get lighter, that's when the sulfur, that's when you want to be making those applications, because it is more leachable with the higher rainfall levels.
Okay.
Elemental sulfur works really good if you own the ground.
Yep.
Because it's a long-term solution. Where if you're renting ground, probably you want to use a sulfated sulfur of some type.
Right. It's just like lime, because the bigger particle size you get of elemental sulfur, the slower the release time is, the finer particle size. Mm-hmm. It's just a really good comparison between lime and elemental sulfur.
Mm-hmm. Well, anything else? That was a good discussion on sulfur.
That's what I have for this week.
Well, Turk, looks like you got a notebook and a poster.
I got all kinds of stuff here, Joe. One of the first things I want to talk about is Corteva sent out on their quick link the comparisons between Enlist system and the dicamba herbicide system, and we'll put this link up, but it's just a really good reminder of the differences on the application, and you can spray Enlist up through R3, where dicamba you're done at R1. So there's a huge difference in the application window on in-crop application. And then also in this, it points out that the difference in the application during the day. You can't spray until an hour after sunrise, and you're done 2 hours before sunset. And that's what the label says. So
that's
again,
on dicamba.
On dicamba, where Enlist, you can spray sunrise to sunset as long as you don't have temperature inversions and other things slowing you down. So again, lengthens out your application window. So there's a lot of people are making that herbicide decision right now, and if you haven't made a decision on what you're going to do, there is a huge difference in when you can spray and when you can't, and the length of time that you can spray. Just that from R1 to R3. I mean, your June 30th is the cutoff date for dicamba. On the label, some states have went to June 20, and so again, you just have a lot more flexibility with the dicamba or the Enlist product.
I liked it from the standpoint that it laid it down side by side, and you could look at the Enlist system versus the dicamba system, and you could see exactly how much difference there is. Now, of course, when you're applying dicamba, there's some other things that come into play too, the wind direction and wind speeds and things like that. But the bottom line is you have much more flexibility with the Enlist E3 system. You can get your work done, and you can get on to fishing or vacation or whatever it is else you do in the summertime with your family, and not have to rush it. And of course, weeds keep growing no matter what. If you can't spray because of wind direction, you have a lot less restriction. So it's a very good thing to consider and how it fits in your operation. I mean, if you're comparing the Enlist system versus the dicamba system.
Plus, those buffers are basically, soybeans are not even a susceptible crop in an Enlist system. So you can spray right up to the neighbor's crop with Enlist. So it's again, big difference. Take a look at that information, and it does a really good job laying out.
Sure.
So another thing I wanted to give an update on the dicamba lawsuit. The manufacturers of the pesticide have intervened in the case and asked that from the Ninth Circuit Court and asked it be moved, and so the parties all agreed that it would be moved out of the Ninth Circuit Court, but it went to the District Court of Columbia, which is in Washington, D.C. So you went from one liberal court to another. And so not sure that that's going to help them. It's actually may end up hurting them because with the Biden administration and their green policy, it's going to be basically in their backyard, in the discussion about the problems that dicamba have with the environment is going to be front and center in Washington, D.C. during this trial. So it may end up actually not being a good thing for them to do that, but we'll see. But it is moving forward again at a snail's pace, it seems like. But
and we really don't know when the ruling will come out.
No.
Which, if it is against dicamba, we're looking at deja vu again.
Same thing that happened last year.
Except that they're going to push that it's going to be that's it. A cutoff is what we're hearing, but again, we don't know, so it's hard for us to speculate. But as you know, farmers need to think about this. When you're risking your crop and your livelihood on killing weeds, the Enlist system, you don't have to worry about this noise.
The lawsuit is actually asking for the products to be vacated again. So I think it's I've said before, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, in my opinion, that this comes out or that this gets done through the court system. And again, it just depends on how fast that it can get pushed through. But I'm sure that the defendants are going to do everything they can to slow it down.
Sounds like it.
So another thing, Joe, at the Iowa Power Show this week, they were dropping these off. And this talks about the COVID, the Iowa COVID recovery system, and farmers are basically everyone helping one another. So February is a mental health month, and so it's very important that everybody call their friends and call their neighbors and just say, hey, how you doing? Because February is just the doom and gloom month, if you will, with everybody seems to have a higher incidence of mental health or getting their mind in a funk in February. So there's some websites that I'm sure every state has something like Iowa has here, but you can call in there and you can get hooked up and talk to a counselor if you have some issues that you want to talk through. So I think it's very important that we talk about that, and we can put that link up for this as well on there.
You want to take care of your physical health and your mental health, and obviously if you see someone that looks like he or she is having problems, by all means get some help for them.
Well, we all know, I think everybody can relate to someone that they know in farming that has been affected by COVID, by either a death or a very, very serious and extended illness that is going to have an effect on their ability to get their crops planted and everything this year. And farmers are the best for helping one another do that kind of stuff, and I'm sure that's going on right now. So very important. And then the last thing I got, Joe, and it really it might be a week early here, but Valentine's Day is coming up on the 14th. And don't forget to plan for that, because it's kind of important, Ben, to remember Valentine's Day.
Appreciate the help.
Dirk, that's from experience.
That's experience, yes.
Well, anyhow, it is very important, and I definitely you want to take care of somebody that's real important to you, and that's what Valentine's Day is all about. And
that helps that mental health aspect as well.
Yep, and actually that leads in real well to a couple of jokes I have, and since we talked about Valentine's Day, I can bring this one up. I've been saving it, Turk.
Okay.
And it's what did the male sheep say to the female sheep?
No idea.
I love you.
That's good. I like that.
You like that? Okay, now I got another one. It's got to be more balanced, with these farm animals here. What do you call a chicken that can count her own eggs? A mathma-chicken.
Mathma-chicken, yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Well,
that qualifies for corny.
Anyhow, if by any chance you have any questions or suggestions to go to Cup of Joe, you can do that on our website. Go to Cup of Joe on our website, and there's a place where you can ask questions. And you can also, down at the bottom of, if you're not viewing this on YouTube, there's also another place you can send in suggestions or questions or topics or anything that you think would be of interest to anybody that watches this show. So I hope that'll get you to next week. As always, we appreciate your business and we appreciate your support. We hope you and your family are healthy, and we'll see you next week. Take care.